Hello, and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Roshni. We're writers helping writers with whatever writing ailments you might have.
Whether it's related to your craft or your career, we can help.
Are you ready for your session?
The
The doctors
doctors
are
are
in.
in.
Well, happy 1-year anniversary, Tom.
It is. It's. I can't believe it's been a year already.
Pretty much.
I feel like it was just yesterday, but it wasn't.
So for any of you guys who are wondering what we're talking about, it has been a year since, at least in Los Angeles and the United States, we went into COVID lockdown.
Yes. And do you remember where you were, like when the announcement came down? I literally remember where I was.
I totally do. Do you want to go first? Or do you want me to talk?
Well, I was at work. I was at the tour company. I worked at doing customer service for Hollywood tours, and literally got the announcement from the governor that we're locked down, and we basically closed up shop and went home. And things were already starting to slow down. We just said we're not coming to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
Was the end of it. We just closed the doors because we were definitely not an essential business.
Yeah. It's funny. I remember, well, I think when we had like an official like, okay guys, we're packing up, we're going home, was actually I was in my dodgeball league. Like we just sort of stopped and cleaned up and went home.
Mid throw.
Mid throw, right? But you know what was interesting? I remember this time last year. So I worked a lot the first week of March, and then the second week of March, I had a few auditions. And one of them was for some commercial, but the audition was in person because obviously we were still doing in-person auditions at the time in Santa
Yeah.
Monica. And for those of you who don't live in LA, trying to get to the West Side in the afternoon is like you might as well just curl in a ball and cry. It's just it really
Oh.
really sucks because the traffic to get out there, then you have the audition, the traffic to get back. And it was a 2-day call, and I didn't go the first day, and I was debating going on the second day, and then they sent out an email that said, "Hey, guys, we had such an outpouring of people on the first day. It was, like, standing room only. People were waiting for hours. Everyone's on top of each other. Just be prepared if you come for the second day. Come early and expect to stay for hours." And I remember because we'd been hearing about, this illness that was coming out of China, and I just remember thinking in my head, "It's coming this way, it's coming this way." And I looked at that notice and I thought, "Do I really wanna go to this audition?" And I looked at when it was gonna shoot. It was, like, at the end of March, like March 24th or something, and I thought, "This thing's gonna be canceled." So I just didn't go because I was like, "It's not worth it, it's gonna." And then sure enough, we went into lockdown and everything beyond March 17 got canceled. So I was like, "Well, there you go."
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and then I think I thought like, oh, we'll be done with this by like I thought we'd be back at it by 4th of July. So
Oh, wow, you were optimistic.
I was being optimistic. I was like, oh, this will be a few months, we'll be fine. But then, yeah, that didn't go so well.
Yeah, and do you remember I remember that initial, like, feeling in the first month. I'm not just talking about the mad rush to go get toilet paper, but just in the industry, everyone's like, "So are we still filming things? Should we keep writing things? Should I finish
Yeah,
editing that project?" Like, everyone's like, "What do we do now?"
yeah, we really didn't have an idea of what we were in for. I mean, it was kind of we look back on it with hindsight, but it was kind of like really bizarre. And Hollywood got totally. I lived right in Hollywood, and it got totally quiet. And it's bizarre to not have traffic in LA like that. You would
Yeah,
go for a drive and be like, where is everyone? It's like a ghost town.
yeah. I mean, it single-handedly kind of annihilated the industry because we are so dependent on being with people. That is the whole crux of the entertainment industry. You're
Sure.
always with people. And it was just like, for an industry that's going 600 miles an hour, it just went like completely dead.
Right. And as writers, most of what we do in LA is about networking,
Hmm.
and meeting people and pitching. And that was all, nobody ever thought that, that wouldn't happen until it didn't.
Yeah.
There are online methods of pitching and online pitch fests and, seminars and webinars and stuff. Those have been around for a long time, but they weren't like the main way you did things, which is obviously what they came to be. They came to be like the tools that you had to use as opposed to options you could try.
Yeah. What's funny is, I mean, the year was obviously very quiet. But I really started feeling it around Christmas, because usually around the holidays is when we have the networking events for, like, everything,
Oh,
writers,
yeah.
actors, everything.
Every
I
weekend.
missed that. I really, really missed that this past year.
Yeah, we met at a Christmas party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know?
Yeah, those are used to have 2 or 3 of those a week, it seemed, and those were fantastic. Great places to meet people and network.
And then nothing.
And then nothing. A lot of people bailed. They said nothing's happening, so they got out of town. We talked about the exodus, so the quote unquote exodus before, but
Mhm.
we stuck it out, kept
We're still
going.
here, yeah.
I thought I'd get more done. I didn't.
Oh,
When it started to settle in that this was going to be a lot longer, I kind of like, oh, okay, I'm going to work on these projects and these scripts, and I guess I got some things done, but I didn't get exactly what I planned to accomplish. How did you do? Did you well you were working on audiobooks already, and you were working on your novel too, right?
mhm, yeah, so, I mean, in that respect, it was nice because it was productive, so I really ramped up on the voiceover side, and then, like you just mentioned, I was writing my very first novel. But it's funny because you don't realize how much you need life as an inspiration until life is not really happening around you. Because what are you
Oh,
gonna write
sure.
about? You're just sitting, watching your 4 walls, watching paint dry kind of thing. And last year especially, it's trendy. Everybody was like the rise of the Zoom script, and nobody wanted to watch them. Did you notice
No,
that?
I had
Everybody
no
filmed a
desire.
Yeah, everybody filmed a Zoom film, and I think only one of them people were like, "Oh, this is interesting," and after that, everyone's like, "I don't wanna watch this. I don't wanna watch the virus on TV," like, I think a couple shows mentioned it, and then they were like, "Let's pretend that quarantine is done," because nobody wanted to keep seeing it. We were
Right.
living it. We didn't wanna watch it in our entertainment.
Yeah, there was one John Cho, the actor who was in the new Star Trek. He did one where I think his daughter went missing, and it was all through the computer. He was doing the research to try to locate his missing daughter.
Oh, that was before COVID, though.
I know, and that's the interesting thing is that came out early in the lockdown because it had already been made. So it was kind of prophetic almost.
That one actually came out way before lockdown. I feel like that was in 2019. That one's been out for a
Was it?
while.
I don't know.
Yeah, because I remembered seeing it, like, months and months before lockdown. Maybe you didn't see it in your queue till lockdown,
That's very
but that
possible.
one's I forgot what it's called. I can see the poster in my head too. Hilarious, I can't remember the title. But no, that one's been out for a while. Yeah. Sorry, Tom.
No, that's fine. But no, the idea is that that's the kind of movie everyone started to want to make. One where you could have people in one room or one place. There was a movie on Amazon. I think it was called 7500. It was with Joseph Gordon-Levitt as a
That was
pilot,
good. Yeah,
where
that was
he
good.
was basically alone in the cockpit for this whole crisis.
Mhm.
I don't know if that was created as a COVID era movie, or if it was just done as a contained thriller kind of thing.
I think that one was filmed before COVID.
I think so too.
Yeah.
But they kind of were like the big name ones that kind of like, people then looked to and said, well, these are the kind of movies we can make. And then some of them, came out and didn't do so well.
But there's a big difference between a contained script in, like, one location versus, like, a contained script, which is a Zoom show,
Yeah,
you know?
The Zoom ones were.
Nobody wanted to watch. That's what I'm saying, nobody wanted to watch the ones that were, like, the Zoom thriller or, like, the Zoom comedy. People were like, "I don't wanna watch Zoom because 'cause I'm on Zoom all the time."
Yeah, everybody's pretty much over Zoomed, and there's been studies. Actually, I think Stanford did a study on Zoom fatigue. People didn't realize that just because you sit in a room in a meeting doesn't make it quote unquote face to face like a video call or a Zoom.
Yeah.
There's like a science behind it. How when you're in a meeting room, you can look at anything. You can look at the wall, look at your notepad. You can go right on the board. But when you're on Zoom, there's this like direct eye contact kind of thing
You
that
can't look
happens.
away, yeah.
Yeah, so it's actually much more fatiguing, like physically immensely.
Can I just say also in the last year, how much we've put the word fatigue on everything. Zoom fatigue, quarantine fatigue, lockdown fatigue, like everything is something fatigue. Have you noticed
Oh
that?
yeah, that goes along with everyone just kind of being sick of everything. Yeah,
Oh my
the
gosh,
whole
yeah.
wanting to go back to normal, which whether we will, what level of normal we'll go back to is still to be determined. The film industry, shut down for a long time, but then you started to see things like commercials were still getting made, and then indie films were popping up that had been made somehow. And then as the big studios said, we can't sit around forever, they started to put, they had the resources, the money to, sequester their entire cast and crew in some remote location to film, or, to put in the testing protocols to do it locally. So that's a huge change, that's probably not going to end anytime soon. I certainly didn't write as much as I thought it was going to. Yeah, there was this whole idea of like, oh, well, I could just work on all these scripts that I've never finished, these ones that I'm in like act 1 on, or just ideas. So some people said like you should be, we should all be productive because we don't have to work or we don't have to go anywhere. And that didn't happen. And there's a lot of psychology behind like the fatigue part. There's a mental strain that makes it harder to do those kind of things because of the situation you're in.
Well, I think as far as, like, being productive and working at home, I don't know if you felt this way. I felt like I kind of went in cycles where, like, right in the beginning, when you're in that mental lock of, like, "Is the world ending? What's going on?" You kinda can't concentrate, and then when you're like, "Okay, I'm accepting things," and it sort of feels like a vacation, and you feel really productive, and you're working on things, and then you're kind of like you go through that 180 again where you're like, "Oh my gosh, I just want a normal routine, and I wanna, take my laptop to the coffee shop and write there, and, but I can't," and things like that, and so I think, like, it's one thing when you have the choice to go out and, meet with friends and write in a coffee shop and sit on the beach, or whatever. But when you don't have those choices, it kind of slows your brain down a little bit too, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, the idea that I could be going out and doing other things, but I'm staying home to be productive. I'm working on my projects because I work at home on my other stuff too.
Mhm.
That makes you feel like you've accomplished something. But when you have to be at home and you're at home all the time
'Cause you don't have another
and
choice,
you
yeah.
can't go out, then you're kind of like, well, where do you draw the line between working and not working? And then it feels, of course, time kind of changes. Like how, the days and weeks go by kind of fast too. So you actually don't realize how much you're either getting done or not getting done. That's a different, your brain gets into a different mental state then.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things would be like, is this ever going to end? Well, one of the things I was wondering, and this goes to the working with agents and managers and stuff. Some of them shut down. Some of them kept working. Then it kind of became like there was this theory that, oh, well, if all the agents are not working on booking their clients for stuff, then maybe it's a good time to pitch them your stuff to try to get an agent. And then it became kind of, I think then they got overwhelmed where they each had thousands of scripts stacked up on their in their
I
inbox or
was
whatever.
gonna say, who said it was a good time to pitch to an agent? They barely had any projects to send their current rosters to.
Right. Well, the idea is that they weren't making deals because nothing was getting produced. So from that perspective, they had time because they weren't on that side of their business. There's
Yeah.
the recruiting the writers to their pool, and then there's the going out and pitching the writers. But if no one was producing anything, then the writers didn't have any work, so they didn't have any of that to do.
I mean, it's kind of, everything's a pipeline. It's kind of hard to pitch a project, not only because you don't know if it will be produced, but also you don't know if it's the type of thing that can be produced during this time or will be popular to be produced. For example, if
Yeah.
you like, like we talked before, you go pitch a Zoom project to an agent, maybe last March they were like, "That's cool." Now they're like, "Oh, excuse me, no." Nobody wants to watch that. So again, it's, the timeliness of the thing. But this would actually be a great time to talk about changes we've seen in the industry. We've touched upon it over the year, but we'll condense it here.
And what do you think the biggest change has been?
Besides the fact that everyone shut down for a while?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about animation quite a bit,
Mhm.
and that seems to be the section of the industry that's thrived actually in this day and age. And pitching animated shows was pretty hot, at least I thought, for a while. I've actually been pitching a story myself, for wherever I can,
Mhm.
and I've heard from people that there is a need. People are looking for animated shows, and then animation, because it doesn't involve physical sets, they were able to use technology to keep production running remotely. I've read some articles where a lot of animators are really happy with how this has worked out. It's given them, so they don't have to sit in rush hour traffic for 10 or 12 hours a week. And it makes them, get more work done and less stress and less, anxiety about it.
Mhm. I think, what's funny is right before all of this happened, all of those fights between the Writers Guild and the agents was a big topic. And then when everything shut down, I mean, I know that they're still working through all of those things, but it just sort of became a non-issue. Like, did you notice you didn't hear about it as much?
At first, there was supposed to be like discussions, I think, between the Writers Guild and the agency organization, and they put that aside to do something for all the people displaced, and they there was a lot of talk about and actually during the holidays, a lot of the agencies, I read about how they, instead of they're throwing their lavish parties they used to throw, they donated money to support groups that were helping out of place actors and writers and whatever it was.
Mhm.
So I feel like it initially, not initially and through the later part of last year, there was some positive stuff that came out of that, but it seemed like then the fight kind of grew back. It came back to the front end. Some of the smaller agencies started, signing deals with the WGA, and now it seems like the bigger ones have finally kind of like figured out they have to come up with some sort of deal, and they're mostly, I think, working it out.
It just seems like it's so much on the down low. I don't know.
It,
I could be
it's much
wrong.
less of a, yeah. It's not
Yeah.
the court stuff is done. They're not fighting it out in court anymore. I don't think. I think that's all over with. So it's kind of just negotiations again.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it was a big deal before the lockdown happened. It was like everyone was
It
yelling and
was
screaming.
huge.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
huge.
because I think wasn't, like, one of the biggest meetings supposed to happen, like, right as lockdown hit? Or, like, in May? It was,
It
like,
was
somewhere
it
in
was
that time
coming
frame.
up. It was
Yeah.
coming up, and then they had to put it off, and that's when they started talking about, well, what can we do instead of fighting about this thing? Because obviously it's not.
As important as what's going on in the world.
Yeah, the thing was the writers had already fired all their agents at that point when the
Mhm.
lockdown happened. So the agencies didn't have clients to represent.
Mhm.
Then the clients didn't have projects to work on. So everyone kind of came to a halt at that point.
Man, that's crazy. Yeah, so what other things have you seen change? Well, the rise of streaming and
Oh
the
yeah.
"Is AMC closing?" question? I can't even tell anymore.
AMC had acquired more financing to keep it going. I think it was a Chinese company or something. So
Mm,
they're okay. I just read that Alamo Drafthouse filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy
saw
protection.
that one, yeah.
Yeah, I never went to one, but I feel bad for them. I feel like I should have gone to one.
Do they have them in our area?
I think there is one in LA. I think the recent
Okay.
article mentioned there was one here. I just never heard of it or went to it.
Mhm.
And then I'm trying to think. The Cinemarks was doing okay. It's a mishmash of what theater chains have done to stay in business,
Yeah.
and whether they're going to be reopening. But it looks like most of them are going to be okay in one fashion or another. And then the big question is, will people go back to the theaters, which we've talked about on a lot of cases. I caught up a lot on my backlog of TV watching and movie watching. The lockdown gave me a little extra time to catch up, and the streamers, with the back catalog, really, I mean, I think there's several, at least a half a dozen or more shows that I was like 2 to 3 years behind on that I managed to catch up on. So streaming has been a big part of my life through this, and obviously Netflix's stock price certainly reflects that. And now we got Paramount Plus is launching this in the next week or two. That's going to be the new CBS All Access is becoming Paramount Plus, and they're lumping more stuff in with it. So that's the latest streamer.
Wow, I didn't know that they had a new one coming out.
Yeah, it seems like they just can't stop making streamers.
Oh my word.
Well, they'll need more content, original content for that.
Mhm.
Apple Plus has kind of limped along. It's where Netflix has done great, and I'm trying to think. Disney Plus has done huge. numbers. Apple Plus is, they haven't been real forward with their numbers, but word is that most people that subscribe to it still get it for free. I do. Over a year now since I think I bought an Apple TV, so I got a year of Apple Plus free.
Mhm.
And then they just sent an email saying, we're just going to keep letting you use it for free for another 3 or 6 months or whatever it was. They're on their second seasons, though, of some of their shows. So, they're starting to build their catalog. Maybe more people will check it out.
It's interesting. If anything that the pandemic has shown us, like, it's so we've talked about Apple programs before, and, like, the one actually, okay, 2 shows I've seen on their, lineup have been really good. Morning Show, and then we were watching For All Mankind recently, and they're good. But the thing is, like, Apple itself, like, the interface is not easy to use, which is funny because Apple computers are really intuitive. And, like, just like we're talking about, like, people in Zoom fatigue and all this stuff, like, if anything from the pandemic, they need to make all technology really intuitive and accessible because we rely on it so much. And if it's not like, if you can't figure it out within a few clicks, you're just like, "Forget it." I don't wanna watch this program. I don't wanna,
Yeah.
sign up for this service because I don't wanna jump through this many hoops.
Yeah, I find since I use a lot of different services and I use Apple TV because you can have all of them on one interface, I find I can see the differences between them, like which ones are good and which ones are bad. And it seems
Mhm.
like they need to have a Zoom meeting and talk about the like best practices and stuff because
Yeah.
not I don't think there's any one of them that's really nailed it down yet.
You mean, like, user-friendly?
No, no, I don't think any of them have. Disney Plus was kind of unique because they had such big buckets of content. You had the Star Wars bucket, the Pixar bucket, the Disney bucket.
Oh, yeah.
So they kind of and the Marvel bucket. So they were able to divide it up that way, which is kind of helpful. But then, like Netflix used to be actually easier to use. They kind of lump everything together, and it's very hard to sort and organize on the screen, like to find things because it's just one. I mean, I have such a long queue. I don't even know how many things are in my queue now. But to find anything, you either have to just search for it, or you have to scroll through hundreds and hundreds of shows to find it.
Well, because
Used to
Netflix,
be on
like,
the
they're
computer.
yeah, well, I was gonna say because Netflix, the way they seem to, put everything together, it's just a rabbit hole. It's like, "Oh, did you watch, this one show about this one subject?" You'll like 50 shows on the same subject. You're like, "Thanks."
Yeah, I hate when you do research on something and you look up a show and then you just did it for the research and you don't really care about it.
And then
And
that's all they give you.
then they start it's kind of like
Yeah,
Amazon too. When you order things on
yeah,
Amazon, they are recommending the same product, even though it was just for research.
yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So funny.
And we actually did a whole episode on getting in a rut where like Netflix would always show you things you currently watch instead of exposing you to new things too. So you kind of have to be a little more adventurous and search out new things and different things. And I think there's been one of the things that the promotion of online movies has been bigger. It used to be all the advertising for movies and TV was big billboards, broadcast network shows, and big blockbuster tentpole movies. And now you start to see some advertising or at least social media for these smaller movies that have come out on non-social on streamers on Amazon and Netflix. They're original films, and you start to see these things that you probably would have missed otherwise that are pretty good. Like Queen's Gambit has become a huge
Yeah,
hit, even
yeah.
though it's about a woman playing chess. It's not.
It's very well done.
It's a very
Yeah.
well done. It's a great show, but it's kind of not what you would imagine being such a huge hit. It's kind of thing that you would see that would be the Oscar contender or the Emmy contender, that people would be like, what was that show? Because I never saw it because it was on Bravo or
Mhm.
whatever. But because it's on Netflix and Netflix has such huge numbers and it has the trending and all that kind of stuff going for it, some of these things that might have otherwise been overlooked are getting a lot more views and a lot more exposure. So I think that's great for smaller films and smaller shows that you never heard of before with actors you never heard of before. It's giving those people, and the writers obviously and the producers and directors, giving them more exposure, which is a really good thing.
Yeah, well, you brought up an interesting point actually because we aren't going to see films in theaters. What's usually the primary way of advertising a new show or movie is trailers,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know? There's gotta be
online.
other online, yeah. And have you noticed that trailers have gotten really long? Like, 'cause, you and I talk, we both watch a lot of YouTube, and, like, if a trailer comes up for a new show, trailers used to be, like, a minute or less, they're, like, 5 minutes long now. Have you noticed that?
Some of them, yeah, are almost like mini-sodes, like, they're
Yeah!
literally doing a sizzle reel, a teaser.
I'm
Yeah.
just like, "Oh my gosh, I don't wanna watch this long of a trailer because 'cause I'm not used to it, it's too long for me." But, yeah, I don't know if that's the new trend or something, but
I watch a lot more YouTube these days. I get a
Mhm.
lot of my news from YouTube.
I do too, yeah.
Yeah, we've kind of been addicted to news lately, and more news sources are putting clips and whole episodes of their evening broadcasts on YouTube. While they have their own streaming channels, they're putting it out there. In fact, I think they're commercial free, which is unusual too.
Yeah. We never actually discussed it. We might have kind of touched on it in another episode. I'm not sure. But did we ever talk about the late night talk show hosts and who did the best job transitioning in during
I don't
quarantine?
think I know you've told me personally about it,
Oh,
your
okay.
faves. I don't know if we talked about it on the show though,
Oh, okay. Yeah,
but
because
yeah, it's a good thing to kind of compare. Yeah.
well, what's funny is, okay, so we watch a lot of late night talk show hosts or whatever. Seth Meyers is one of our favorites. We
Hmm.
watched a lot of Stephen Colbert, and we got really into Trevor Noah. I don't know if we really watched a lot of Trevor Noah before quarantine, but for some reason, like we were watching a lot of Trevor Noah. And I liked Conan before lockdown, so I'd watch him a little bit after lockdown and stuff like that. You know who I seriously think, if you had to like grade all of the late night shows, Trevor Noah, they did a great job because he shot his segments like a YouTuber. Because they knew, like, that's the platform people are gonna be watching on right now during lockdown. So, I don't know if you ever noticed, but the way they do the editing and the way he, like, addresses the camera and just everything about it, it's like watching a YouTube video versus, like, the others who tried to keep that, like, studio feel, and it didn't quite work because they didn't have a studio
Uh,
audience and, like, no one to react to the jokes, and, like, you could see how dependent they were on having that studio feel. And Trevor Noah, just the way they did the jump cuts and his expressions and everything, I'm like, "You got it, man." Like, I will watch this all the time because they had it down. I don't know how to explain it. Go watch it, everybody. Compare
okay,
them.
yeah,
Tell
I
me
have
what
to
you
check it
think.
out. Yeah, I've been
Yeah.
watching a lot of. I watch a lot of the same ones you do, but I also watch James Corden and
Oh, yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
and Jimmy Kimmel a lot. Jimmy Kimmel really kind of stuck to the studio. He just did it with no audience.
Mhm.
And now they're starting to get back into the studios. At first, they would get into the studio with
Yeah.
basically their staff would be the audience, all spread out in the theater. Colbert's still using just a set, and Seth Meyers is still just using a set. I don't know if he's in his actual studio or not.
I'm trying to remember. I feel like he's kind of gone back and forth. I think at one point they did go back, and then he was back in, like, the home.
Yeah,
I think now he's completely back in the studio, though, I think. I'd have to
yeah.
watch again.
My favorite was John Oliver because he did his in an empty white void.
Oh, yes, I remember his.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was my favorite. So he really helped me get through the pandemic. I think
Yeah.
stuck in his white void.
So fun.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's gotta be hard though, like, if you think about it, because that's a special form of writing, to write, like, a late night talk show, and when you're dependent on a studio audience to give you some of it back, some of that energy back, that's gotta be really hard to write and to do, you know,
Hmm.
when you don't have the audience.
I don't think John Oliver ever had an audience. I thought his was always on set.
Well, just because you
But
you
then
mean
he's
a
got the
set with
bonus.
no you mean a set with no audience? John
Right.
Oliver doesn't have an audience? Oh, okay.
No, no. So I
Huh.
think he always had that. So he was kind of lucky, I guess, and he didn't have to worry about audience reaction. I don't think he did. I'd have to go back
Now
and
we'll
look
have to look
now.
this up,
Yeah.
yeah. I assumed that all late night hosts had a audience.
Well, he's not late night. He's HBO, and he would be one night a week. So his was
Oh, okay.
he had a highly produced show. Is what he had. He didn't have guests or anything. He was just talking about a subject. So he didn't really
Oh, okay.
need an audience or have an audience to play off of. It's kind of interesting to compare him to the people who did have to go through that transition of
Yeah.
audience to no audience. And it'd be funny because they'd be doing their jokes and they kind of sit there waiting for
For the laugh,
laughter and
yeah.
it wouldn't
Yeah.
come. And it was kind of funny at first. And they kind of mellowed out, but and got into it. And then they'd just be like, you know, kind of riffing with the camera guy. That would
Yeah.
be it.
Yeah. No, it's like I said, it's gotta be really hard because, especially too, even as a writer, you don't realize until you don't have it that like, if that's the format and you're like, "Insert laugh here," and you're like, "Oh, okay." And then I don't know if you noticed over time, even the hosts themselves, when they would crack the joke and they would just be like, "Yeah, that was lame." Like, they would just acknowledge it, like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not gonna work," you
There
know?
was a bit more self-effacingness. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was a lot of that.
Yeah.
So what do you think is gonna, we're at 1 year. When do you think, we're
Whew.
gonna see, I think we talked about this, a slow progression towards normality, hopefully. Things are slowly getting back there.
Like, what's gonna happen? We're in March of 2021 right now. Future predictions. Let me see. Well, I wonder if this will completely kill the whole idea of pilot and episodic season, or
Mhm.
if it'll like hyperdrive it. Because in theory now, this is pilot season, and you know, I I don't know. Do you know what's going on? I mean,
I
it feels
don't.
so under the radar.
With the streamers taking over so much of the market, the broadcast season has become less, important to the overall market, I guess, is the thing.
hmm but that still matters because like pilot season and episodic season still matters to writers and producers and actors because it was our cues for when to pitch things or when to go out and audition for things and stuff like that.
Right.
So that changes it for the people behind the scenes for sure. So that's something to think about.
Right, that's all part of what the WGA was fighting about too,
Mhm.
was the seasons were shorter on streamers, and how
Yeah.
does that allow writers to work on multiple shows because you can't, overlap,
Yeah.
and that's gonna be a big change. If things are all haphazard and there is no pilot season, then how do you manage that? I was gonna say my thing on the whole COVID, changes in because of COVID in production, we're gonna see, first of all, the vaccines are gonna be slowly getting out into the market, into people. So
Mhm.
that's gonna help. But at the same time, COVID testing is gonna get cheaper and quicker. There are several, at home kind of instant, like pregnancy style test COVID things where you swab your own nose and the line turns blue or whatever it is if you're positive or not. So that's going to speed up, testing a lot in the next few months as they ramp up production of those. It's going to change everything for schools and businesses and everything. So you'll get faster, you'll get instant results like in 10 minutes instead of, you know 2 days or 3 days, or so that's going to help a lot. And I think that'll allow things to get going faster and have less stop and starts,
Mhm.
because they'll be able to identify people who are positive quicker and get them isolated before they have a chance to, infect everyone else on the crew, and having to like shut down for 2 weeks.
Mhm. I think you might see more a rise in regional markets as well because it's just so much easier to pull talent. Like, let's say you're shooting in like Kentucky or something. It's easier to pull people from that immediate area than fly them out from like LA or New York and make them quarantine for 2 weeks, you
Yeah,
know?
and then having to test when you get there and test
Yeah.
when test every day. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
gonna, again, like we said, the big productions can go wherever they want and sequester the whole cast and crew and do that. But on the smaller productions, it might be easier to pick a more, you know, I guess you call it, geographically desirable area that's like outside of LA that's not so populous, where you can more easily do that. And the
Mhm.
people that live there are already, especially if they have vaccines then.
And I feel like I know we cited that one article where they were talking about animation moving outside of LA, and we can put that in the show notes. Um, but I also think that that is only applicable to people who are already very well established in their field. So I think if you were established in animation or in writing or whatever that you can do remotely and you did move during COVID, you can probably continue to do it remotely because you already were established. But I think for newcomers, like I want to break into the business, I think you might still have to go to an industry center unless you
Sure.
have really good online connections.
Well, and it comes back to expense. Companies see, well, gee, we're saving a lot of money on real estate right now. And if you go back into offices, then you have issues with testing and upgrading the office space for safety and those kind of things. So there's a cost benefit analysis that needs to be made before companies do decide to go back into the old style office setup.
Yeah, but my point is if you're not already known in the
Oh yeah.
industry,
Hmm.
how are they gonna know you if you stay in, Maine or whatever? Like, they're not gonna know who you are.
Mr.
So,
Stephen King.
but you see what I'm saying? Like, you have to be established to be able to do that. So, I think if you're, like, a new college grad or something, you might still have to consider moving to an industry center first to make it and then move away if you wanted to do that, but I don't
Sure.
know if that you could establish yourself from far away unless you have really good connections somehow through your college or through people or whatever.
Like we've said before, a lot of stuff still has to start here in LA, whether it's
Yeah.
the writing, the deals, the financing, all that happens here before they go somewhere else and actually make the movie or the
So
show.
what do you wanna do when, lockdown lifts? What event or what thing or whatever are you really looking
I
forward to doing?
don't know. I just want to go visit my family. I haven't.
Right?
Yeah, a lot of people are probably like that.
Yeah. That's on my list, but, as far as, fun industry things and it's so funny because if you had asked me 2 years ago, I wouldn't have said this because it was so crowded. I actually kinda wanna go back to Comic-Con.
I had a feeling you were going to say that, and we just read that they canceled it again for the in-person Comic Con
Mhm.
again this summer. So
Yup.
yeah, well, maybe next year or maybe in the fall, Comic Con New York or something.
We'll see what happens.
I want to go. I know what you want to do. You want to go to Mario World.
Oh my gosh, yeah, well, it's supposed to be here at Universal LA, but I'll go to the one in Japan too, for
Yeah,
sure. For
yeah.
sure. Oh my gosh. How about for all of you, what do you wanna do when lockdown lifts? Let us know in the comments, and we will see you guys soon.